And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TVP World. This is another edition of Press Review where we round up the most important topics and headlines of the week with my fellow journalists, columnists, and esteemed guests. Now here on Press Corner, we celebrate the privilege of a free press by having a diverse panel of opinions and let you be the judge. Without further ado, let's introduce our panelists today, starting from my left, Aleksandra Karasińska, journalist and director of RASP Foundation. And of course, we have Mr. Jakub Biernat, journalist from Belsat TV. On my right here, Mr. Joe Harper, a freelance journalist, and join us for the first time, Jędrzej Bielecki, journalist from Rzeczpospolita. Hello, guys, and welcome here to Press Corner.
Good to be with you.
Good morning. Hello.
So the first item of on our agenda is actually the election that is taking place today in Germany. Now, it does seem like the AfD party, some of the more right-wing, more extremist parties are on the rise in Germany, especially when it comes to the region of Saxony and Thuringia. What are the implications of that? And of course, well, how is it going to affect the European politics? Let's first take a look at our report to find out more, and we'll dive right into the discussion.
Centrist CDU and far-right AfD are running neck and neck in both Saxony and Thuringia. In Saxony, the CDU is narrowly leading by 3 points, so within the statistical error margin. In Thuringia, the AfD has a comfortable lead of 6 percentage points. Voters from minority communities across Germany worry about the consequences an AfD victory could bring.
The AfD is an anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim and anti-democratic party, a party that denies fascism, denies the Holocaust. I'm afraid that at some point people won't be able to tell the difference, good or bad. You're just a foreigner, even if you have a German passport. That's what worries me personally.
The AfD is a pro-Russian, anti-immigration party, running on a platform of ending military aid to Ukraine and turning away refugees. Its members have been involved in numerous scandals, including the violation of Germany's ban on the use of Nazi slogans.
The AfD is a party of resentment, a party of people who are not happy with what is going around and want a radical change, an easy change, a simple change, and just want simple solutions because they're so angry and so disappointed.
Another party capitalizing on voter dissatisfaction is the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance. Wagenknecht founded her party less than a year ago, but it is expected to come third in the upcoming elections. The Eurosceptic far-left party advocates for ending military aid to Ukraine and promises higher pensions, better schools, better jobs, and less immigration.
If somebody was keen on voting on Die Linke or the Social Democrats, but was unhappy with the current stance on soft stance on migration policy, then Sarah, the union of Sarah Wagenknecht is a perfect pick for such a person.
Aware that immigration has become a national issue, Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced that Germany would resume deportations of criminals of Afghan nationality to their home country. 28 Afghan criminals were sent back to Kabul on Friday. Analysts say a strong showing by the AfD and Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance will impact national politics.
All right, so it does seem like political polarization is going to be a very big topic going forward in Germany. So starting with you, Aleksandra, how likely do you think that the AfD party will actually take places like Thuringia and Saxony?
Well, from what we see in the polls, very likely, and we actually could already think that the vote is fixed. So the AfD will be first political force in this local state parliaments. And the implications are really grave. I would say at least 2 points. One is this anti-immigrant rhetoric that is also, I'm a business economy journalist, so I will tell you more about economy. It is a huge issue. Right now, German economy is in stagnation. It started during pandemics, but the war in Ukraine and crisis that followed heavily impacted the German economy. So I saw yesterday in Financial Times the report that the Society of Local Small and Medium Businesses in Thuringia and Saxony, actually, they publicly make a statement that if the far right wins, it will have a disastrous effect on the economy because the country, these regions need immigrants. They need immigrants to work, and so there is, this very strong polarization inside the country. And the second point is, if the far right wins, which is very likely, it is very good news for Mr. Vladimir Putin, because he would have actually an ally inside the German politics. And this might have very long-term implication, because we are heading into the national elections next year.
All right, Mr. Biernat, Jakub, can you tell us also how this is going to affect the well, on the federal level? We do know that these are just local elections. However, it is going to have a little bit of a ripple effect when it comes to the German politics as a whole, isn't it?
Of course, yes, but we must also understand that until now Germany is very much divided between East and West, and for me it's really strange that after more than 20 years of unification of Germany, still we see this division, and we are talking about a very rich country which has many tools to unite these two regions that were separated before. So it shows some kind of disaster of this policy of unification of Germany first of all, and secondly, also as Ms. Karasińska said about the economy, also it shows the whole German economic policy that were based on cheap Russian energy resources was also wrong, because now when they are gone, we see that the economy is in stagnation, and we see that these radical parties are rising. So this is some kind of complicated situation for Germany, I would say, and I don't see any good ways out, in fact.
Right. Joe, any theories as of why the division between the German population is so strong?
Well, I think you see it across the post-communist world, right? East Germany is no different. In a sense, you see a lot of people whose position after 1989 changed fundamentally. And a lot of people in the East, I think, started to see themselves as a kind of source of labor for the Western economy, right? There is some research, as far as I know, that a lot of in the 30s, I think, Nazi support was quite strong in the East as well. So there is a kind of tradition. Whether or not that has had any impact in terms of people's voting behaviour now is kind of moot. But it has kind of very strong economic roots, right? Structural roots. And then I think what's happened since 2015 is extremely important. There's somehow been a galvanisation of this residual kind of conservatism, which you could say was a product of post-communism, and a target which is very easy to identify. So the influx of whatever it was, up to 1 million refugees from the Middle East after 2015, in and after 2015, I think has probably had a major impact, and also obviously what Jakub was saying about the economic implications of disconnection from cheap sources of energy from Russia, right? Also, Russia is probably supporting the AfD in various ways, and I suspect it's also across Europe. I mean, you see it in France and to some extent, I guess, in Britain as well. The migration issue has become mainstream in a way that it was quite marginal, I think, probably before 2015. Yeah, I mean, it's a very dangerous thing. The only thing that can be said, I think, for the AfD is that that there is some kind of firewall mechanism, unspoken, unformulated, let's say, uncodified. But the other parties will join up to defeat the AfD, right? So it's not a question, I think, of whether the AfD will gain seats or gain positions of power. It's a question of whether or not this is the beginning of a kind of gradual step towards taking state power and then kind of a federalization, an institutionalization of the AfD's power.
All right, so this might just be a prelude of what's to come. Mr. Andrea, we know that you were writing an article about it very recently, actually. So can you tell us what's your take on this?
Well, I think that you have to put this into context. I mean, when you look at the polls in 2019, in Thuringia, AfD was almost the same level as now, a few percentage points. When you look at Sarah Wagenknecht in Thuringia, if I remember well, 2019, the Die Linke, which is more or less the same kind of radical left-wing extremists, they were at the level of more than 30%. They are now down to 14. Most of this electorate was taken by her. So this is not a revolution, this is an evolution. This is a step-by-step taking over by those populist parties. Secondly, I would say that if you look at Europe, this populism went far more in many countries. Take Meloni in Italy, take Poland with PiS, take Front National and Mélenchon in France. You have 2/3 of population who voted for parties which are anti-systemic. Take Brexit and a country which is maybe the oldest modern times democracy, voting for people like Boris Johnson who were just lying all the way. And so what would you expect from East Germany? Then you mentioned this question of cheap German gas. This is one of the engines. There are two others which went down, which are not actually anymore there. Germany was basically pursuing a kind of free ride in NATO for many, many years. Not now. This changed. And the third engine is, of course, massive export to China. You cannot continue this because China became a competitor, a danger. So you have three reasons why the German economy is in a very bad shape, and you cannot just change this in one moment. So the price is paid by the coalition of Olaf Scholz, and this is the support for those three parties, the Green, the Liberals, and the SPD, are a source of more strength for those populist parties. And maybe the last question, you mentioned the specificity of East Germany and West Germany. The question is how this unification was done, how Chancellor Kohl did this unification. The political situation was completely different than today. We didn't know how much time this weakness of the Soviet Union will last. Kohl wanted to do it as quickly as possible. He saw this window of opportunity. He didn't know when this window will close. So, for example, this was not a reunification. This was an annexation. And from day one, you remember this exchange rate of one Western mark to one Eastern mark. This, in one day, destroyed all the competitiveness of those five Eastern landers. Then you have, on the level of psychology, those people who completely by chance were part of the Eastern Bloc, that you were born in Lipsk and not in Hamburg. This is complete by chance. I mean that, and they were treated as second-class citizens. And you were young. You had young guys coming to those landers and taking the jobs of those people. I don't know, whatever, engineers working for 40 years. So millions went to the West. Basically, what was left were older people, mostly men, who had this vision of the past, and they are just voting because they were in that way because they were treated like this, and they are looking for parties which are anti-systemic, trying to destroy this establishment which created this situation. This is the same logic like with Donald Trump. How is it possible that people are voting for Donald Trump, those who
are
poor people who are voting for a billionaire, because what they look for is someone who destroys the establishment. They don't care really about the program. And so I think that this is a kind of logic I see here. And I wouldn't say that the key, of course, the German past is terrible, so this is why we are so nervous about that. But one maybe last point. In Germany, you do not, for the moment, you do not have this tendency of mainstream parties to enter into coalition, especially with the extreme right. If you look at Spain, at the local level, Partido Popular with Vox, they agreed to a series of agreements. In Italy, you have Forza Italia with Meloni, as well the same kind of in France, you have part of the Republican Party of Gaullist parties, Eric Ciotti, who made an agreement with Le Pen. This is not the case in Germany for the moment. So I would say that Germany is behaving in a pretty decent way for the moment. I wouldn't say that this is quite, and I would say that Germany is following the example of Tusk here in Poland. I mean that Tusk was saying no agreement with peace and was advising the Spanish government, so the former Spanish government, the conservative government, not to enter into any agreement with Vox. So they didn't follow this, they didn't listen to him. But in the case of Germany, hopefully this will not be the case.
One last thing, you said that German mainstream politicians behaved properly and they had this firewall. Yes, but as you see, Olaf Scholz and his coalition, socialist coalition or leftist coalition, Democrats, they started this anti-immigrant rhetoric recently just to oppose or to gain some points in the policy. So I think this is also a very dangerous moment that the mainstream democratic politicians are starting to use the same anti-immigrant.
I wouldn't say they are starting, because the vision is that Angela Merkel signed this agreement, well, opened the borders in 2015. What she did the next year, she signed an agreement with Erdogan.
Yes.
With a dictator or authoritarian regime. What was the agreement? To forbid people, millions of them, even to not have the possibility to ask for asylum, just to ask, not to come to Europe, but just to ask. So you have this vision of Merkel who is, but the reality is completely different. So when you say that Scholz started this, I wouldn't say that he started.
Yeah, but I would say that, that the problem of immigrants is really crucial in Germany because of the policy that they applied. For years, Germany offers to the asylum seekers huge social support and free accommodation, yes, and for many people in the Middle East, it's a kind of promised land. People are coming there because they see that there's a place that I don't have to work, and I can have apartment, flat for free, and.
They're also coming because their cities have been bombed.
What we see on the Polish-Belarusian border, these people, they don't want to go to Poland.
They do. They start to come.
Maybe they start, but many of them, they are saying we want to go to Germany, and they are waiting for the smugglers to be taken to
Jakub,
Germany.
Can I just interrupt? I mean, you're saying that these people, millions of people are coming because they think they can live for free in Germany. Is that
I think
not
so.
Not because they've been pushed out of their...
I mean, some of them, of course. Some of them, of course. But some of them are going strictly on the economic, like reasons.
I think everybody goes.
And we see the situation that the billions of euros from Germany are going back to the countries they are coming from. We had situation lastly that immigrants, that these refugees from Afghanistan, they were going back on the tourist trip to Afghanistan, and so on and so on. So, this is I guess, from my point of view, and as I was talking with the normal Germans in Germany, they see the problem. So that's obvious for me that these parties, because of the policy that they applied, they are on rise.
Let me push back on that a little bit. We just mentioned, a lot of these people are actually leaving their country because of the circumstances that's going on. But if that were the case, why are we not seeing more rise of these kind of refugees going to countries that has a more proximity to these countries, but skipping places like Poland, for example, and going all the way to Germany?
Well, I don't make this distinction between legitimate refugees and illegitimate. I mean, if they don't have a job where they live, where they come from originally, and they don't because their infrastructure has been destroyed, or their cities have been destroyed, or they've been somehow displaced or dislocated economically, why would you want to go somewhere which was less economically viable for you?
Right.
I mean, it's not brain science, brain surgery. It's, you go somewhere where you go to where the jobs are, I guess. I mean, Labour moves in the direction of...
But also, this is the broader subject, probably we won't have time to talk about it extensively, but Europe is facing, not Germany, but Europe is facing a migration crisis. And what you mentioned is that for at least a decade or more, European Union and Germany is actually paying huge amount of money to countries like Egypt or countries like Turkey or other countries to stop immigration or to keep the refugees. Actually, you mentioned the war in Syria, for example, from coming to Europe, to Greece, to Italy. And the problem has not been solved yet. So we, as a Europeans, we have to really face the problem of how to integrate people, how to think about migration. And it won't stop because of the climate change.
I understand that the Germans were supporting the Egyptian government blocking people from Sudan,
for example.
coming through Egypt, right? I mean, and that's it. It's been a symptom of European migration policy for a long time, right? That they try to kind of externalize, they push out the problem somewhere else, so somebody else can deal with it.
Right.
But the essence of the problem doesn't change, right?
I think that this is a good moment as well to raise another issue. We are on the 1st of September, 85th anniversary of the beginning of the war, and the question is, are we ready to accept that Germany again will be a kind of, at least on the European scale, a kind of superpower?
Right. We'll have to keep that a question mark as we do have some more topic to get to, but thank you guys so much for the discussion, and wish we had more time. But we are actually also moving on now to the Ursula von der Leyen's new cabinet. As we know, the new EU commissioners are being selected. Some countries already put in their nominations, some missed the deadline, and there's a little bit of, hubbub all around this topic. So let's take a look at a report first to find out more.
Only 7 of the 27 EU member states have proposed a female candidate, falling short of Ursula von der Leyen's pledge of gender parity within Commission structures. Von der Leyen's goals of achieving a gender-balanced European Commission appears less realistic. Poland announced its candidate on August 13th. The nominee is Piotr Serafin, a long-time trusted associate of Prime Minister Donald Tusk and an experienced figure in the EU. From 2014 to 2019, he was the head of Tusk's cabinet during Tusk's tenure as president of the European Council. According to the Tusk administration, the Polish candidate is most likely to take on the role of Commissioner for Budget and Administration.
I cannot think of anybody better to be the Commissioner for Budget, a key portfolio for us.
Just ahead of von der Leyen's deadline, Italy submitted the candidacy of its Minister for European Affairs, Rafael Fitto. Bulgaria also submitted its candidacy on Friday, becoming the first and only EU state to choose both a woman and a man for the role, as was requested by the European Commission President herself. The emerging composition of the next Commission appears likely to be one of the most gender imbalanced in 2 decades, despite von der Leyen's continued push for a more balanced gender representation. Should all commissioner designates clear the hearing process without any problems, the new EU executive might be installed as early as November 1st. However, if even one candidate is rejected, the starting date will be postponed to December 1st.
So let's work our way backwards and start with Mr. Jędrzej. What do you think about the new appointment of Piotr Serafin as, Poland's representative to the European Commission?
Well, he's extremely experienced. He was the chief of the cabinet of Tusk, so obviously he needs someone who is who you could trust. I mean that there is a basic, I think, misunderstanding in Poland about who is a good diplomat and a bad diplomat. The good one is the one who speaks languages, for example, which is absolutely not key. I mean that you had even a lot of presidents, like, for example, Chancellor Kohl, he didn't speak any language apart from German. The question is he someone who Tusk can trust, who knows how Brussels works? I stayed there for 7 years as a correspondent for Rzeczpospolita, so this is an institutional memory as well, that this was done, this was, so this is a person who absolutely has it, because from the 90s he's doing this. And I think that's one of the points which shows that this policy is done in a good way. Is what was mentioned here, that Poland wants to have this portfolio of budget, which is something very concrete. I mean that Poland is rising quite quickly in terms of GDP per capita, so probably the next multi-year budget will be the last one when we will be a net, we will not be a net contributor, and this is a very difficult situation psychologically for Poles. And we remember as well a moment when Radosław Sikorski was like thinking about going there and being the defense commissioner. I think the decision to stay there was absolutely good, because this is not it's not going to be in Brussels. Those decisions are not going to be made in Brussels. We saw on Wednesday the new Prime Minister of Britain in Berlin. There was an announcement that Britain and Germany are going to sign a new agreement by the end of the year, modeled on this French-British agreement, Saint-Malo. What it shows is that Germany is thinking in terms of defense out of the European Union, with America, with Israel, and especially with Britain. So this commissioner is not going to be a key person. This is like for example, José Borrell today is about foreign affairs. So I think that there are signs that this new Polish government is thinking in a kind of practical way, think where the real power is, what Poland's really need, and not in terms of symbols and like it was before last year.
Right, so definitely a lot more calculation coming into these picks. And speaking of the candidates, Joe, can you name some people who are, that caught your eye when it comes to the submissions of these candidates?
I don't know. I haven't looked. I have absolutely no idea. I saw that there's a gymnast. That was the only thing that caught my eye. None of the others, I'm afraid, I can comment on.
But what about the kind of gender parity argument that's currently going on, where I do want to see an equal amount of men and women, but somehow ended up with a list of candidates that's probably the least closest to gender parity since 2008?
Well, it's halved, I think, hasn't it? It's from 13 to 7 or something like that.
It's like, I think it was like 7.
It's 7 now.
It's a disaster, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's important in terms of the symbolism, but I mean, the key thing is the direction in which Europe is going to take structurally, I guess, institutionally. Whether or not what our friend said in terms of the kind of breakdown of the federal approach, a much more pragmatic kind of state-to-state unilateral way of doing diplomacy, perhaps, is the key, right?
All right. Being our only female representative here, can you give us an insight?
Yeah, sure. For me, I'm not only a female journalist, but I'm also a feminist, and I was dealing with economy from this women's perspective, so for a very long time, and I was admiring what Ursula von der Leyen was doing in Commission in the last few years, and her becoming president and leading the way she did during COVID crisis and during the war in Ukraine show really that she is a great leader, and she was very committed to this gender balance agenda. European Union is actually based on the ideal of gender balance and equality. So she really, the last few years, she showed this is possible. This is the cabinet was working. It was very efficient, and right now we are having, I would say, a backlash, and it's something that is many people I talk to in Europe, they say, okay, the situation is grave, the economy is not good, the geopolitical situation is not great, this is not a good time for equality. But you know what, from what I've learned, there's never a good time for equality, so we should really underline it. And the government, obviously even Polish government, just dismissed the request to send 2 candidates, male and female. And I don't believe there is not even one good female politician in Poland to be a candidate. So I'm really disappointed, also in Polish government.
But if, like you mentioned, if things were going so well, where is the pushback coming from? Like suddenly they feel like it wasn't going well, or?
I think it's a broader problem. The situation in the parliament changes. We were talking about the Germany politics that is much more radical from left and from far right, but it also applied to the European Parliament, and Ursula von der Leyen has a much harder time to actually build a coalition and actually create the new European government. So maybe there is a reason, but I just think that her stance in this matter is the same. Unfortunately, the head of governments, most of them male, ignored her request.
All right. Unfortunately, we do not have a lot of time to go into this topic real deep, because we need to move on to the situation in Ukraine, which is very dire as of the moment. Of course, Ukraine is pushing into the Kursk region, while the Donbas region is seeing a little bit of trouble. And there's also the recent small spat between the Ukrainian president and the Polish defense minister. A lot to get into, but let's first take a look at a report to find out more.
3 weeks into its offensive into Kursk, Ukraine continues to advance.
We have 1,300 square kilometers of territory under our control. 100 settlements are located on this territory. Also, thanks to the successful actions of our troops, we have significantly replenished the prisoner exchange fund. To date, 594 servicemen of the armed forces of the Russian Federation have been captured on this front.
Military experts assert that one of the objectives of the Kursk operation was to divert enemy forces from other areas, particularly Pokrovsk and Kurakovsk. Although some 30,000 Russian servicemen have already been redeployed from Ukraine to the Kursk front, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Aleksandra, reports that the Russians continue to focus their main efforts on the Pokrovsk area.
The situation on the Pokrovsk front is fairly difficult. Throughout last week, we've seen an average of 50 skirmishes per day. The enemy is using their advantage in personal weapons and military equipment. They're actively using artillery and aviation.
Russian forces also amped up their air attacks this week. On Monday, Moscow conducted the largest series of airstrikes since the start of the war. 7 people were killed and 50 were injured in the attack. The airstrikes continued throughout the week.
At the moment, there are 28 wounded and 3 killed. The number will grow. Emergency services and police are working in all locations.
President Zelensky admitted that the war with Russia will ultimately end in dialogue, and he is working on strengthening Ukraine's negotiating position.
One of the areas where part of the work has been done is the region of Kursk. The second is Ukraine's strategic place in the world security infrastructure. The third is a powerful package to force Russia to end the war through diplomatic means. The fourth is economic. That part I won't talk about.
The meeting is expected to take place next month at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Zelensky revealed that he would also present the plan to Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
So some of the most recent development has to do with Zelensky's call for, of course, unrestraining their use of Western weapons to hit deep inside Russia. I think at the first moment of the incursion into Kursk, he made a very good argument saying that these kind of worry about escalation, these kind of arbitrary red line that Russians drew doesn't seem to come into fruition. However, now there's also voices saying that perhaps striking deep inside Russia won't really be that much beneficial to the situation on the ground. What's your take here, Mr. Biernat, Jakub?
First of all, Ukraine is striking deep into Russia all the time, but using its own weapons. Today, in the last night, we had Russian oil refinery next to Moscow attacked by Ukrainian drones. Also, one of the Russians' power plants. So, you know, for me, really, I don't understand when the West wouldn't let Ukraine using its own weapons to attack targets deep into the Russian territory. So this is the one thing. Another thing, it's good to mention. We see the Ukrainian offensive in Kursk region, and what we see from the Russian side, we see that the Russian society is absolutely doesn't care about what's going on there. In fact, we see no, let's say, patriotic wave of defending the Russian land. The Russian troops are also leaving their positions there. it seems to me that, and it's a hard situation for Ukraine, of course, because we see that for Russia it's not important that part of their territory is seized by Ukraine, and it gives more tools to Putin, more power to Putin to continue the war, because whatever Ukrainians do in Russia, he can continue, for example, offensive in Donbas region.
Can I not a little bit disagree with you? I would say that it's not important that the Russian troops gain in the Kursk region. I think that Putin claims that he is a head of state and an empire. Russians perceive themselves as an empire. An empire does not lose land. So this is a huge blow to his image and to the way he is building his image inside the country. Maybe the society does not know really what's going on the ground, but eventually they will figure it out because of the refugees coming out there.
Yeah, but
there will be heavy fighting. So I wouldn't say it's not relevant.
Probably yes. I'm talking about the last polls of independent Levada Center, and the numbers there shocked me. That for example, the level of Putin support raised, people think that they live better and better, and so on and so on. So, from my point of view, only the situation like in the perestroika times, so the end of 80s, when there was no food, no food at the shops, makes Russian feels bad. Feels bad, and in this situation, some guys went to the front, they died, but we are receiving the money from the families are receiving the money from the government. There's no unemployment at all. We know that the Russian economy is in quite poor shape. The chief of the National Bank, Elvira Nabulina, said that the Russian economy is now overheated, in fact. So there are no workers to work in the factories. The inflation are very high. This is the sign that something can change. But right now, in the public opinion, of course, we don't know also whether Russians are telling the truth in these polls.
Yeah. That's the hardest part, right?
This is the hardest part, but now we can see no sign of some kind of despair. But in Russia, everything is possible. So we have to be prepared for any scenario. In fact.
Yeah, that's pretty true. And of course, this is a developing story, and we'll have to keep following the situation as it unfolds. In the meantime, I would like to use what little bit of time we have left to dive into a little bit of history. We do know that today, September the 1st, the outbreak of World War II. And let's take a look at a report before coming back into our next discussion.
On September 1st, 1939, a German battleship, Schleswig-Holstein, fired at Polish Westerplatte munitions depot. Alongside the bombing of the small border town of Wieluń, these attacks marked the start of the Nazi invasion of Poland.
In the early hours of September 1939, Wieluń was bombed. Now, Wieluń had no strategic importance. Many young children, babies, days old, and pregnant women died in the bombing of Wieluń.
The attack was preceded by the Third Reich's Anschluss of Austria in March 1938, followed by the occupation of Czechoslovakia and the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, with a secret protocol establishing Poland's and the Baltic states' partition by the USSR and Germany. The protocol was enacted on September 17th when the Red Army backstabbed Poland while it was striving to repel the Nazi onslaught from the West. The ensuing World War II claimed the lives of some 80 million people. Civilian deaths are thought to account for some 50 million. After World War II ended, Poland found itself under the communist rule. The communists, representing Soviet interests in Warsaw, eliminated dissent by means of murder, imprisonment, and other forms of terror. On Saturday, Poland marked 44 years since the signing of the August Agreements. The historic agreements put an end to 18 days of an occupational strike at the Gdańsk shipyard. The workers protested the firing of their colleague and created a list of 21 demands toward the government, including respecting democracy and actions to improve the country's economic situation. As a result, the Solidarity Trade Union was born and secured Polish workers' rights to strike. What followed was the establishment of a legal, independent, and self-governing trade union, which effectively transformed the country from communist rule. August 31st was hailed a public holiday back in 2005, named the Day of Solidarity and Freedom.
So, of course, as we here all know, this is a very pivotal day for Polish history. However, there is a distinct lack of foreign delegations on this 85th anniversary to Warsaw. Mr. Jędrzej, is the world getting more disinterested in this part of history?
Well, I would say that this is a kind of normalization. I mean that we are 85 years after this event, and this is not anymore a decisive moment for Polish society. I mean that this is so long ago first. Second, I would say that we have the best relations with Germany since centuries now, and especially a dramatic improvement since last year. And Germany is not anymore the object of, of daily attacks like it was in this building every day 1 year ago. And so I would say that this is a sign of a kind of normalization. But this is not just a change because of the results of the elections last October, but as well of what happened with the Zeitenwende in Germany. Of course, there are a lot of weaknesses. This is a very long-term process, but basically those two countries, Poland and Germany, are now on the same, going in the same direction, I would say, in this key issue of Russian threat. I mean that Germany is the second biggest provider of support for Ukraine after the United States. There are, of course, discussions, for example, concerning the Taurus systems, long-range missiles. Germany doesn't want to give, but why? Because America doesn't want to give them. So Chancellor Scholz is extremely Atlanticist. He's following the American lead. But we cannot forget just one sentence here, that this operation in Kursk with German, but as well with American arms, this was the first time an American president agreed to use American arms against a nuclear power. President Biden did this 3 weeks ago. So this was a fundamental moment. So in all those bad news about AfD, we cannot forget that this is such a moment. And there are discussions between the Polish and the German governments concerning the investment engagement of Germany into Polish defense. Is Poland ready, for example, to accept on a permanent basis German soldiers on the eastern border psychologically? I don't know, because the damage done to those relations during 8 years of the peace government was so huge that for Prime Minister Tusk it's very difficult to reverse this tendency to convince the Polish society that, like Radosław Sikorski is saying, Germany is an ally, not an adversary. So this is a long-term process because Tusk needs to win next elections, and he's extremely cautious. You remember that his first visit was to Paris and not to Berlin. The same day he went to Berlin, but he wanted to do it in the framework of the Weimar Triangle, not to show that he's too close to Germany, because he was, painted by peace as a kind of German spy. So going back to your question, I would say that this is a sign of kind of I would say normalization of this relationship, yes.
Right. Last but not least, Jakub, we are running a little bit out of time, but we'll give you a little bit of overtime. Can you help us understand how we can go about, Mr. Jędrzej just mentioned there, balancing remembering history, but not also being overly antagonistic to our allies?
First of all, of course, it's a long time since the war ended, but I would say that the Polish national interest is somehow to remind that the war in Poland was something different than the war in the West, yes. almost every family was affected. Thousands of horrific stories we can hear from our relatives about the war. And these Germans should remember that they did something very, very bad to Poland, to Polish people. But of course, as we see, it doesn't mean that we cannot, be in the European Union, have normal contacts with Germans, and so on and so on. Also, we see that comparing, for example, Germany and Russia, we see that the Germany, they make the very big step towards the understanding their role in the history, and that's why they change completely. It's not anymore militaristic country, empire, and so on, and they don't think about the war. The Russian that didn't do it in the past, they are facing the same after and after. So they are returning to use war as a tool of politics.
Right. So as we commemorate this anniversary, it is important to still remember who our allies are and, of course, come to, peace and unity in the European Union. Thank you guys so much for being with us here on TVP World on this edition of Press Corner. Unfortunately, again, we are running out of time, but this has been a very fruitful discussion. Really appreciate it. And meanwhile, thank you guys for watching this edition of Press Corner. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.